a lot of people have asked me about mixing science fiction and westerns, whether that seems strange. It did seem very strange when I pitched it to the television network as Firefly. By the time it got to becoming a film as Serenity, we'd already had the show, so Universal was able to see what it was that I meant. I don't think it's strange to combine the two. I think most of modern science fiction is based on combining the two, because we're talking about the two tentpoles, Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Trek was pitched as Wagon Train to the Stars. It very much had a Western aesthetic. Star Wars takes a bunch of stuff thematically and visually from Westerns. The thing that we love about Westerns is something that we've lost, that we can't really do straight up. We can't have this open space, this sort of this frontier story, because we look at history now with a colder eye, and it's not cowboys and Indians. It's a little more complicated than that. But if you take it and you put it in a science fiction movie, then it's going to be very much more comfortable. You can play those big themes, those big moral landscapes, and those literally big landscapes in a way that you can't anymore. Westerns are considered a little retro. So mixing the two makes sense on a thematic and visual level. It also just makes sense because if there's a frontier, it's going to be space, because we've run out of them here. And if it is a frontier, it's going to be filled with frontier people. It's going to be filled with the people who can't afford to be where it's safe and where we have everything. And those are the people that I'm interested in. Well, obviously there are things in a movie that you can do that you can't do in TV. I mean, we got what was, for me, a really big budget. We were able to have space armadas. We were able to have hovercraft chases. We were able to do things that the show could never have afforded. But the aesthetic that we took from the show, we took to the movie fairly literally, which was to dirty it up, to make it as unprocessed looking as possible. The Studio Zoic, threw in camera flares and zooms and finding focus and all the things that we were doing, live action as well, to make it feel integral. Because the one thing I didn't want to do was step outside the movie and go, oh, and here comes the special effect. I do think that some of both films and television suffer from, wow, we can do this amazing introduction, so we're going to zoom in to this planet and through this guy's eyeball and do all this stuff to, and instead of just, okay, we happen to be here and here happens to be space. It's frustrating. I am often asked about the fans, and obviously the fans were a huge support, and not just in terms of being nice, but actually, getting this thing done. The fact of the matter is, when it came time to write and direct and edit this movie, the fans were the last thing on my mind. They were gone. They were out of it. I didn't make this movie for the fans. You can't make a movie for your fans, because then you can't possibly do service to the studio and make your money back. You can't possibly. Everybody who comes into your movie has to be able to enjoy it. Everybody's invited. Otherwise, that's very exclusionary, and it's not the kind of art that I'm interested in making. I knew the fans were going to be happy because the movie existed. They loved the show. They loved those characters. I wasn't going to suddenly change those characters. I wasn't going to suddenly make them more lovable or bigger movie stars or anything like that. It was going to be their people in the kind of situations they would be. Obviously, it would be more than a glorified episode, but it would be, the heart and soul that had been in the show. So the fans were taken care of in that sense. Obviously, certain things happen in the movie that might disturb them because they know those characters so well. But that's the fact of movies. You have to up the stakes in every way, emotionally as well. So I didn't try to open up the movie to everybody else because I didn't have to. I made the movie for everybody else. That didn't mean watering down the kind of world that it was. It didn't mean making it less Western, although I did not manage to find a place for a horse. That's because the movie was mostly interiors. But it just meant making sure everybody could understand what was going on, that people who hadn't seen the show would have as much fun as people who had. Well, when I started making the movie, when I started writing it, I was using the television show as a basis. I had 9 main characters. And I knew right away some people were going to have to step up to the fore and some people were going to have to step back a bit because I wasn't going to have time to service all 9 of them. I think of it as a Platoon movie. Not the movie Platoon, but one of the old Platoon movies. In the sense that we have this bunch and we know them and we get to know each of them about as much as we have to, but, you know, there's the Sarge, and he's, you know, the guy to watch, Robert Taylor in Bataan, and in this case, Nathan Fillion, the captain. But ultimately, I didn't want to do anything to hurt them because I had been on my show. And then I realized, you know, that the movie is all or nothing. The movie is a thing unto itself, and if you worry about where it came from or where it might be going, you're not going to do the best storytelling that you can do. And so I started to get a little tougher on my characters. I started to realize I was going to have to make some drastic changes and kill some folk too, because if the audience doesn't believe there's truly something at stake, then it's a bunch of noise. Then it's just, you know, it's just a ride. It's not actually a story. The only thing I ever regret about any of this are the things I didn't get to do. I have so many stories about all of these people in my head, and there's still a lot of them that will never be told, that'll just swim around in there and bug me. I was talking about them yesterday to one of my friends, because he hadn't heard one of them over and over again, as my friends usually do. I just, you know, I love this world. I love these characters. Any chance I get to tell stories about them makes me really happy. You know, in my perfect world, I would have had a show that ran for 7 years and was followed by 7 movies, because I just never got tired of this world. As for what was done, you know, I'm not big on regret that way. I'm not Mr. Director's Cut. I made the movie as best I could. I thought it was the best movie that I could have made, and I put together in the editing room the best of what I had made, for an audience of fans and non-fans, and that's and then in that sense I move on. And obviously you look at every shot and you go, well, I look at his collar, oh, look at that lens, oh, I can't believe I let that in. You know, you see a bazillion mistakes, but you also sort of close a door. And because I don't like meddling. When a story is told, I believe that's the way it should be. The first time I ever heard a remix of a song on the radio, it frightened me so much I stopped listening to the radio forever. I really do believe a piece should exist in the way that it exists and stay that way. Now, I'm sure someday I'll have a movie that gets cut short and I want to do a director's cut or whatever, but in this case, I really felt like, no, this is the movie, and I felt that way about the episodes. I felt like that's as good as can be, and yeah, that scene that I really liked got cut, but the thing that exists is what I care about, not the thing that might have been. Well, you know, for me, commentary is really just a chance to explain how and why everything was happening, and every now and then to, you know, relate an anecdote, although I'm not big on anecdotes because, well, we're on a schedule. We don't have time for anecdotes. But when you're working with Nathan Fillion, you're going to end up laughing at some point during the day. But it's for me, commentaries are just a peek inside the process more than anything else. What there is to say about the world obviously exists beyond the movie. In the companion book, there were memos I had written about the whole history of this universe and all of that stuff. And obviously there's the series, which is like a huge roll-up, has a huge amount of backstory. But ultimately, it's not like I'm spending my commentary explaining, you know, what the world is, because I think the movie presents that. It's more about getting behind the making of the thing and why decisions were made and what obstacles were overcome or not overcome and what mistakes I can blame on other people. You know, a cult is exactly exactly that. It's its own worst enemy in a sense. It sounds exclusive, and in a way it kind of has to be. But at the same time, you know, I don't believe something has to be diluted to reach a mass audience. Ultimately, I sort of would like my work to end up kind of like, well, religion, like a mass cult, like a really popular cult. Because ultimately I am writing for everybody, but you don't want to, you know, you don't want to censor yourself, and you don't want to get rid of your own particular idiosyncrasies because ultimately they're the only thing that make your work interesting. You do want to challenge people a little bit, but at the same time, you know, you crave their approval. So you're always going to be, you know, working that tension between the universal and the specific. But ultimately, I think that's what every story is. The question is, did you get it right? Did you tell the story? Did you find the moment? Did you give them the emotion that you were looking to give them? If you did that, it doesn't matter if 3 people saw it or if everybody in the world saw it. It doesn't matter if you know that you accomplished the thing. If you told the story, you can't worry about how many people you're telling it to.